Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. I'm Christian. I have Michael and Todd here with me. And today we have another special guest, and his name is Chad, and he is the Director of Engineering over at Danley. Chad, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, why don't we, to open up, why don't we just jump into a little bit about who you are, man? We want to know who you are. This is my first time meeting you.
Yep.
You're really connected well with Todd, who's on our team. But give us a little bit of your background, where you come from, how you got into the industry, and how you kind of ended up at Danley.
Okay.
Hey, before you get into that,
yeah.
Are you like sitting in front of your window, or what do you got going on back there? Is this like home? Where are you at?
That's my virtual background, but it's actually just to my left. I'm just not sitting outside.
Nice you, man.
Yeah.
Live where?
We're up in Dahlonega, Georgia, about an hour north of Atlanta, right at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Very nice.
Yeah, pretty much that ridge out there is the Appalachian Trail.
Nice.
Been meaning to maybe walk that thing someday. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, man.
Sorry to interrupt, man. Go ahead.
You could even do like you could go from the southern trailhead up through Georgia. I mean, you can kind of make it as long as you want. If you want to do like a 4 or 5 day hike, you could just do the Georgia section. So,
Sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Cool.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. So I would say the way I got into the industry, into sound, was started playing an instrument, guitar. Actually started on bass guitar at a young age, I think 6th, 7th grade. And, we had a little band, and of course...
Yeah, we know, Michael. Just relax.
Sorry, Chad. You were saying?
We're getting nowhere here.
It's all right.
Somebody in the band always has to be the gearhead. So I got into the audio and lighting side of that through middle school and through high school and even through college. And then after college, I went on to work for a large nationwide AV contractor doing installation work as the same thing that Parkway does. And worked there for 10 years in the early 2000s and came to Danley in 2011. And I've been at Danley, 9 years, celebrated 9 years this year.
Nice.
And it's been good. And so that's pretty much me here at Danley. I've always been in the engineering department. And I took the role of director of engineering about maybe 7 years ago. And I work with a great bunch of guys, learned a lot from these guys, and happy to be at Danley. And, I think it's a really good, solid company.
That's awesome. Yeah, both Michael and I
maybe I wasn't paying attention. Part of that there, didn't you work for a contracting firm for?
Yes.
Did you say that?
I said that. Yeah, I was there. I was at a contracting firm
for
the 10 years.
Christian's got a button over there at his place that if I fall asleep or I wander off, he
zap,
he pushes it and it zaps my chair and wakes me up. So I start paying attention.
Well, I think the great thing about having a contracting background is you understand what the contractor and the customer, you understand those two levels a lot better than, if you just have only been in manufacturing.
Right.
So I think that's a huge deal. There's a number of us on the team that have that same background, just different time frames, different companies that we've worked for. But I definitely think the contracting background is a strong thing to have.
Well, it is when you're working with contractors, for sure.
That's exactly
that's
right.
what is exactly what I have appreciated over the years working with you, Chad, and Danley. It's you just get what we're doing. and you get what we're under, and it's just a real neat relationship. And I think that's why you and I have hit it off as well as we had,
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's been cool. It's been a great relationship for us.
Well, thanks for your history breakdown there, Chad. Well, another thing that I wanted to dive into before we start talking about actual speakers, technology, what Danley offers, what sets them apart, is a little bit of the history of Danley. When did Danley start? And give us a brief history of the company and kind of bring us to today.
Okay. Well, the great thing is we're getting ready to celebrate this year our 15th year anniversary, and as a company, like I said, I've been here a little over 9 years of that, and the company came about when Mike Hedden was already using some of Tom Danley's technology through some other manufacturers that Tom has worked for through the years, and Tom was actually between projects or between business ventures, and Mike had felt in his heart that he needed to do more than the contracting. So he was looking for something to do, and it made sense. He reached out to Tom, and they met up for, I think, lunch or breakfast, and pretty much pursued the idea. And Tom was looking for a new venture. And I think this one it's probably lasted the longest out of all the stuff he's done. I mean, Tom has worked with, his background is amazing. Just the fact that he's high school educated, doesn't have a college degree, but
makes me feel better.
He's self-taught. I mean, he is, and he's amazing. His mind is amazing, and his ability to explain things in a very layman, simple to understand way is a gift. And so Mike Hedden and Tom Danley got together and said, "Okay, let's do this." And so you got Tom Danley has the inventive mind, so he has the technology and the understanding of creating the solutions. And Mike comes from the business background of having a contracting company and that sort of thing. So they're a good mix. You've got a third gentleman that's considered in that founding, which is Ivan Beaver, and Ivan is he's another extremely smart individual. He works well with Tom, and Ivan had a contracting background and a live sound background, and so they kicked it off, and it's grown. I don't know exactly where we're at employee wise, but it's a whole lot more than the three that started it. If I was to say, it's probably in the Gainesville location. There's 20 to 30 employees, so we're not huge. And then the wood shop has its own setup as far as employees, and so we're getting stronger, and we're growing. And the one thing is, and I don't know if Parkway has experienced this, needing anything custom or anything like that, but we're pretty flexible. So we haven't outgrown our ability to not only be innovative, but to also be able to do some custom things. Or if I had somebody order a cabinet a couple weeks ago, and it's going to be outdoors, but they wanted to delete some things off the top side, and it was nothing to do that. I mean, we just put that in the order. We want to delete some rig points. We want to delete some handles, panels, whatever, and we're able to do that. It's not, because unless it's a plastic product from us, the wood products almost always are going to be build to order. If it's not COVID-19 era, it's 2 to 3 weeks. But that's what makes that great, is people can get custom colors, they can get custom finishes, they can get we can customize deleting or removing items that are in the standard product.
That's cool. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to jump in, we could probably it seems like every time I get together with you, Chad, or get together with someone from Danley, either on a phone call or directly. I know Michael and I were just down to visit down in Georgia here, not Michael, like 6 months ago, 8 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was last summer. I think it was July.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, really?
It seems like every time I get together with somebody, I get another great Tom Danley story. And, for our viewers and listeners, just, and I don't think we're going to get into a lot of those, but we certainly can. But if you're around the industry much, there's just some great minds that are out there in the industry. And Tom Danley certainly fits into that role,
It's definitely one of the top minds.
It's amazing some of the things that he comes up with. If I was just remembering which is a new story when Michael and I, or a new thing I heard when Michael and I were down there, I didn't realize, but didn't he create, I'm trying to think of that it was an acoustic levitator.
Yeah. The acoustic levitator.
Didn't we see that thing when we were down there, Danley? It was sitting
that?
in somebody's office.
It was in my office. Yeah.
It was in your office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I take it to, sometimes I'm able to go over to like career day at one of the local schools. And of course that's a pretty cool, device to keep kids, interested in what you're talking about. Can't bring the fire truck like the fireman can, so I bring an acoustic levitator. But the downside
kids think you're like really cool, right?
Oh, the downside is though it runs at like 24 kilohertz, and although it's not annoying to me, anything I start tapering off about 16K. The young kids can definitely hear it, and it's in the box. It's ridiculously loud.
Explain to people what that thing is.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Okay, so just to I guess we'll technically clarify. Tom, he didn't invent the acoustic levitation. He was involved in it. Pretty much what he did was he made it. I don't remember the exact numbers, but he made it like 100 times more efficient. So they were doing it with the electronics and devices that they had, but it was taking so much power to do it. So Tom, he was instrumental in designing the actual device, or if you want to call it the speaker, the sound source, I think is what he calls it. He was able to make that something like 100 times more efficient, or I could be off on that, but it was significantly more efficient. So they could use a lot less power, and obviously through efficiency, they could get the same or better results, right? So, that's what we're all striving for. And we'll talk about it later, but that's a huge reason to use Danley is we strive for efficiency. We pretty much all the products, we're trying to be as efficient as possible, because we know that it's so hard to make up in the power side of things. It's so hard to make up for that lack of efficiency. And if I can give you 3 dB more efficiency, you can run it with half the power. It really is, it's mind blowing when you start looking at, now we're living in the age, I'm getting off track a little bit, but we're living in the age of, it's nothing to have a 5,000 watt per channel amplifier, and not that long ago, you thought, no way. But then you think, well, okay, so what's the big deal about efficiency if we can get these big amplifiers? Well, it's 3 dB per doubling. So, once you get to 2,000 watts, 4,000 watts is only 3 dB more, and 8,000 watts is only 3. You get to a point where you can't keep doubling. It's that's about like this coronavirus that we're dealing with right now. Look at what doubling does. It's crazy, right? We're experiencing it. It's exponential. So you want to start on the ground floor. If you can start at if the ground floor's level is floor number 3, it's a lot easier to get to the top floor, right? You don't want to start in the basement. So so I got off on something there, but
Oh, that's
So
good.
the acoustic levitator, it's like it's like a 2x2 box, right?
Yeah. So
and what's floating in the middle?
Yeah, you can float with one sound source. You can float small things like we demonstrate it with small pieces of like foam balls, like you'd have like in a beanbag,
like a lottery, like in the lotto.
Yeah. But these are little bitty. They're like the little foam balls in the.
Yeah,
like in a beanbag,
Yeah.
Yeah, when you rip your beanbag and they get it off the floor and you're not real happy.
Yeah.
So with one sound source, you can do that.
Too, right, Todd?
It's pretty cool. I will say
it is cool.
And what happens is it actually, because people go, well, how do you get things to float in there? And how do you get things to float on Earth? You have to have lift, right? I mean, how does a plane fly? So what happens is you have it's a standing wave, which we don't necessarily want in rooms, right? But what it is there's a sound source and then there's a reflector, and it actually, you dial that in to where the standing wave is exactly the figure 8 of the two sine waves, and there's a point in there where because you've got your acceleration and your speed, they're inversely as it's at its peak of acceleration, it's at its lowest form of speed, or vice versa. So they're always 90 degrees out from each other. But there's a point in there where it actually creates a pocket of lift. And when you place the balls in the levitator, you'll see the spacing, because they go right to where they can hover or they can levitate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And if you change frequency, it'll raise and lower, right?
It would, the spacing, yes, exactly. The spacing would change.
So to all our listeners and viewers, Chad is going to be posting this live on his Instagram feed. If you guys want to head on over there, he's at I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I wish I actually had it with us.
There are some cool YouTube videos out there on it.
Are there?
Is there?
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of stuff out there about some of the things that Tom.
Yeah, some of them I've seen are a little bit misleading. I've seen stuff pop up on Facebook, and they'll accredit like some European university or something, and it's funny because then you go, well, that picture right there is Tom Danley, like that's his shoulder. I mean, you're going, well. So yeah, he worked. He's got several aerospace patents.
Wow.
In acoustic, obviously audio patents and that sort of thing. But
he's a
genius.
Yeah. I got a quick story on efficiency. Every time when you talk about these stories pop up in my mind, but I don't remember when it was. It had to be several years ago at Infocom. And Mike was actually doing a breakout session, I think, in your demo room. And I think it was the year that you came out with it. Was it the Caleb horn?
Oh, the big one. Mm-hmm.
The big one you can stand in. Basically, It's 8 foot tall or something like that.
10 foot tall, 6.5 foot deep, and about 4.5, 5 foot wide. Yeah,
huge loudspeaker made
108 drivers.
108. It's the amazing thing about this was, and Mike's such a great presenter. I love listening to him. He's one of those guys that can take very difficult concepts and say them in a way that most anybody can understand.
Yeah.
He makes things simple, at least for people like myself to understand. But he was doing this demo and he was talking about how big the speaker is and how many drivers there are in it, blah, blah, blah. And he takes out his iPhone. I think it was his iPhone.
Yeah.
Plugs in an 1/8-inch mini cable, goes right directly into the speaker terminals of the Caleb horn, and played a song. And that was the only thing that was driving this box.
And there was no crossover or anything in it.
Nothing. He's driving it into how many drivers again?
108 drivers.
And everybody in the room could hear it. Now, I don't know what the output of a iPhone.
What was that, 5 milliwatts?
Yeah,
Something like that.
And here's this monster speaker he's driving, and you could literally hear the song being played through this thing. It was incredible. I thought it was just a hoot.
And
and that's efficiency, people. That's what
absolutely.
that means. Take just a little bit of power and make a noise with something in a device that's large, that is that big.
Yeah, and did you notice? I mean, it wasn't like it was all high frequency. It was full range. And the reason for that goes back to the synergy horn too. I mean, it gives you efficiency, but you're also you're physically aligning and correcting the issues that you could have in other designs right away. So the fact that you're just running every driver full range and it's still coming out, where you go, wow, okay, I understand what song that is. I mean, it sounds good, just low and level.
So before we get too far, I better quit talking or we'll never get.
No, you're good, man.
I just know too many stories.
I like this.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fun. I love working with Danley. If you haven't figured that out, they're just great people and fun.
And we love
they make a great product.
Parkway.
But I don't know what else is on your list, Chad, or a Christian, but Chad, for our viewers that maybe don't know who Danley is, tell us what Danley's really known for. I mean, maybe an overview. I mean, where do we find Danley? Obviously, is a loudspeaker manufacturer, but tell us where we find your products. What makes Danley different, or what product areas do they provide that we would find you mostly in? Where's your niche, I guess?
Yeah, so our niche is definitely commercial audio. I would say still our largest niche is going to be churches, churches and auditoriums. We have made a huge impact in the last, we'll call it, in the last 9 years. We've made a huge impact in the sporting venues, collegiate and professional, as well as a lot of high schools, smaller colleges, that sort of thing too. But we see that our products fit. We have a wide variety of products and sizes, as Todd was just talking about. Our largest being the Caleb, with the 108 drivers, with its complemented Matterhorn subwoofer with 40 15-inch woofers and 40,000 watts of onboard power. But we all know that's not the typical customer. We have to remember, I don't know exactly what the latest is, but you always heard that the average size church was still, what was it, like a couple hundred seats or something like that, or 100, 200 seats.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those venues out there, and contractors know that, especially your sales guys. They're meeting with them every day. So our products, I guess what we could do is, do you think we should just kind of talk about where we're at in the industry and kind of what makes us different? Is that?
Absolutely. Yes, I would love
to.
to.
Is that fine? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wrote just a couple notes and, some things on the topics. And, Danley, what we strive for is we want to best replicate the point source. And if you're not familiar with this terminology, I'll try to make it, pretty simple. The industry uses two kind of sources, or we try to replicate two types of sources. We have the point source and we have a line source or line array. We're definitely different than the line array. So, it's not that, I'm not going to spend much time on that, but in the point source world, I think is more important. What makes us different is that, everything is axial. So everything is either, coaxial, two-way or three-way, in some cases four-way. And what that allows us to do with the synergy design, this is full range products, it allows us to replicate a point source the best, is what we believe. because we're able to get a number of drivers, anywhere from 1 to 108 drivers. We're able to get to behave as if it's one source. And that's really challenging. I mean, I sold a ton of two-way 15 and horns, 12 and horns back in the day, and they do a fine job. Where they tend to not do as well is it's the tonal quality throughout the coverage pattern. So if you look at, we can align to one point between the highs and the lows, or the highs, mids, and lows, but we can't, and that's going to be at one point in the coverage pattern, but we can't do that throughout the pattern. So Danley can. So if you look at like an impulse response of our products, and you look at on axis, off axis, above axis, below, and you look around, it's all going to be similar. And other products, you're going to see a lot of variances because there's going to be issues with offset drivers and only being able to align those to one location. So for us, we believe that we are the closest to a true point source. And I'll throw out there, whether it be a line source or a point source, those are not achievable because they're the little word infinite. So like infinitely small is a point source. Well, nothing's infinitely small. And a line source is infinitely long or tall, and nothing is that. So we have our earthly examples of these devices, and we've chosen that the point source is what is in nature. It's what is it's what naturally you would have sound coming from. So it helps us a lot in the especially the athletic market, the football stadiums, baseball fields, anything like that, outdoors where we have great distance to cover. We can do that really well, and the sound is going to be the same from when it leaves the device to when it gets to the person several hundred feet away. And I know you guys have had several installs that are based around that.
Yeah, let me share a story if I can. I'll try to be quick. But so I think the first time that we met, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know one of the first times we worked together was at the Grand Valley State University football field project. I know that's when you and I first met. I don't think that was my first experience with Danley, but so make a long story short, Danley or Grand Valley State Lubber Stadium was looking for they were going to a large digital scoreboard. Previous to that, all their sound equipment was it was a distributed system around the stadium. And they were going to a digital scoreboard, which in that case, typically when you do that and you start showing videos and things of that nature, you want your sound source to be coming from the same location as video. So they're looking for a way to put audio on this large LED wall scoreboard. I won't mention names, but they had talked to a few. They had a consultant, I think, that they brought in. I don't even remember who it was. And they were looking at a couple of designs for loudspeaker systems, and the ones they were looking at were line array products. And this is not a slam against line arrays or anything. It just happened to be what they're looking at, and these line arrays would be flanking down the side of the scoreboard from the top down. The budget for it came in a lot more than what they were expecting. The amount of sources they needed, the amount of amplification, the weatherizing, and everything else that they needed was just they came to me because we had done a lot of work for Grand Valley over the years, excuse me, and asked me my opinion. And I remembered this loudspeaker company that I had met maybe a year or two earlier at NSCA or at the Infocom, and I decided to check them out, which actually ended up leading to a trip down to your headquarters down in in Georgia, down to Danley, to experience a loudspeaker that they had come up with called the Jericho. And I'll let Chad tell you what that thing's all about. But basically what we were able to do is with a left and a right line array on each side of the scoreboard, one for the home side, one for the visitor side, we were able to replace that line array system with a point source of 2 of these Jericho speakers on top of the scoreboard. The crazy thing was that I had never experienced these things. I went to Danley, and they put this speaker out on the shipping dock, told me to walk 200 or 300 feet, 100 yards out in the middle of this field. And I'm just, to myself, I'm laughing the whole time. I'm like, this is insane. I'm standing in the middle of this field, and they fire this thing up. And the amazing thing to me that I experienced that day was that even though I was over 100, I think, how far, I can't remember how far that field was, Chad. Maybe it was 100 feet, a couple 100 yards. I don't remember exactly, but it felt like the loudspeaker was 3 feet in front of my face. I mean, I was so far away from this thing, and it was like right there in my face. And it sounded almost to me the same as if I was standing within 20 feet of it.
Yeah.
Or a couple 100 yards away. Anyway, that has been a very successful installation for us. It's still a place I love to bring people because I just believe it's an amazing loudspeaker. So that's
really cool.
Chad was saying that whole point source thing, but the ability to create sound from a distance, and it literally sounded like a studio monitor at 100 yards is the first time I had ever experienced something quite like that. So anyway, the Jericho I know is
tell us a little bit about the Jericho, man. I mean, because how long ago was that project?
Oh, that was 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, so it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was all at 10.
Right. And so that's amazing that, I mean, you guys, I mean, with the company only being, how old you said? 15 years old? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 15 years old. I mean, back then you were already kind of leading the way with these point source boxes, right? So explain to us a little bit about that.
Well, and now that Jericho line has 7 boxes? 7 different series that came from that
and more to come.
Speaker.
More to come.
Oh, boy. That. Now you got my attention up.
You just released a new one last year, didn't you? Was it
we did, yeah. The J7.
J7, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So give us the overview of the Jericho. The J1. What's a J1?
Okay. Well, a J1, and I mean, I don't have the exact driver counts in front of me right at the second, but
I know there's 6 18s.
There's 6 18s. There is 6 6-inch mids, and there might be 6.5. And then there are 3 inch or 1.4 HFs in that. The big thing, okay, so I guess what we could start with is, the Synergy horn came out, one of the early ones, and one that's still extremely valid, whether they all are, but people still love the sound of the SH50. And the SH50 was an early one. It's a pair of 12s. It's 4 5-inch mids and a 1-inch HF, and it's amazing. It's an amazing sounding box. It's fully passive, and
I listen to 3 of them every Sunday.
Yeah, you got them at church. So
great box.
They're a great box. So then what happened was, okay, we needed to be wider. So then things came out like the SH69 and eventually the SH96 because things needed to get louder. So the Synergy design started to develop into to louder boxes. Well, probably like the SH25, which is a 25 by 25, really narrow box, and then the Genesis horn, they were like considered our loudest boxes. And the Genesis horn, the big step there was we traditionally had multiple low frequency and multiple mid drivers. We hadn't stepped into the multiple HF drivers because it's very difficult. When we start talking about wavelength and we have to keep things within a quarter wavelength, anything above 1.2K starts to get pretty difficult physically because the drivers can't occupy the same physical space. They bump into each other. So because we're always striving to be the least amount of interference. We want positive addition. We don't want negative interference. So the Genesis horn utilized what was the original Paraline lens, and it utilized two of those. The Paraline lens actually is a wavefront shaper, so we can shape the wavefront with the Paraline lens, and with those two stacked, we were able to use that as kind of the quote unquote first combiner, HF combiner. It then went from there to the J1, which is the one Todd has referred to at Grand Valley, and that one had three, but it wasn't a Paraline lens. It was a stacked combiner. It was actually an extremely complicated HF combiner, but it worked really well. After the J1, the J2 came about, and the J1 was 90 by 40, had a lot of low end. It was actually a short, the low end was loaded into a short bass horn. So you got a lot of that like 50, 60 thump. Then the desire was in the J2 to actually have it be as louder, but not necessarily have to have all the low end capability. So it still has the 618s, but they're loaded in the traditional Synergy design, and which is the woofers are mounted pretty much to the back side of the horn flare, and they enter in at the correct point on the horn. You still get good bass in the J2. The J2, it's this will be a hard one to remember here. It's 618s, is it 24 mids, and I think a dozen, I may be off on that, but a dozen HFs. 36, 16, yeah.
So for our listeners,
there's 42 drivers in it. It's a bunch.
The simple thing, and then the Caleb's got how many? 108. Yeah. It's just crazy stuff. But the amazing thing about, for me, to help our listeners understand, is you take the ability to take all these drivers, put them into a box, and make it sound like one speaker.
That's exactly, that's the magic.
That's the magic of the whole thing. It's just there's all these different devices, and they put them in there in a way, and I'm not the tech, I just know what it sounds like, and it's absolutely amazing. And it sounds like the J1 sounds like a studio monitor.
That's great.
Got all these speakers in it.
So we recently did an install of the I forget what line it was, but we just installed did a Danley install at a church up here in North Michigan, and it definitely has that clarity to it. But
the output power,
right.
I got the spec right here on my computer, so
Christian, that was a pair
you got to listen to it. But I mean, the J1, the Grand Valley speaker we put in there, has a peak output rating of 151 dB.
Wow.
From 45 hertz to 18 kilohertz. Now, the crazy thing is, I just, even going to Danley and listening to it, then we got it installed. And the interesting thing about that installation was, and Chad, you helped me with this, is that by coupling with two of these speakers on top of the scoreboard, the low frequency response actually coupled right down the middle of the field. And it's interesting because at this time we put the speaker system in, they were doing a stadium expansion as well, and they're adding a visitor section at the far end of the field.
Yeah.
So you got a field, you got a track, and you got another 20 feet. So it's, how long is a football field again?
100 yards, 120 yards.
Yeah, so I think by the time everything was said and done, and the score, they were a long ways away. And we fired this thing up. Chad tuned it all up and everything. And I went and I heard this annoying buzz coming from somewhere. I walked to the far end of the field, and when we were playing a really thumpy track, the bleachers on the far end of the field were literally vibrating.
Yeah.
It was insane. And that was the student section, so it worked out very well. So the two speakers coupled the low frequency right down the field and hit them bleachers square on. It was a beautiful thing.
That's really cool.
I had that same experience at Hope College. Was my first experience with Danley. There was two GH60s on poles, and it was a very similar experience where I walked all the way to the end of the field, and it was powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
not to make it sound like all we're after is thump, because people can make thump, but from clarity, a single loudspeaker, and with clarity and everything else that goes along with it.
And that sort of distance?
300 feet away.
For a low end?
Yeah.
Outdoors?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is. It's something you have to experience. So
a church we recently did was, and this is what I think we need to communicate too, is that the affordability of even a smaller Danley system is very reachable for most places.
Very reachable.
And we recently, Christian and I, did a project with 2 SH69s and what was that, Mini 15s?
The minis, yeah.
4 of those.
Yep.
For a whole, probably 300 seats.
Yeah, probably 3 to 400.
3 to 400.
Yeah,
and it rocked the place.
It was rocking. Yeah, it was rocking. And we definitely went with 4 of the subs because me and Michael tend to over like the sub.
Yeah, we like sub.
No, we just want a certain amount of headroom with the subs, you know.
But, I do, as a, obviously audio is a hobby. So, I've got a small little production company that I work weekend festivals and stuff like that. But I use 4 of the Mini 15s outdoors, and I do all these little parks and areas around this, where I live. And I mean, it's pretty amazing what you can get. 'Cause I like it because I'm a lot of times a one-man show, and if I've got to move something, I can't have a big speaker. I'm 4 Mini 15s and a pair of SM80Ms on poles, and I can do anything around here.
So the other cool thing, just so I don't forget, for our listeners and those viewing in on us, the cool thing about Danley, I think I'm making an accurate statement here. So if I say something wrong, make sure you correct me, Chad. But every one of their loudspeakers is available in a weatherized version. So all of them come either way. They can go in or out.
Well, because they can customize, baby.
But every box, every speaker in their line can be winterized, which is, I don't know of any other company that does that. Some people make stuff for outdoors, but they don't make their same stuff that they make for indoors for outdoors. So now you can have the exact same speaker indoor or out. You just order it in a different version with the AT on it.
That is correct.
So I got to finish with one quick story. I'm sorry.
Keep going, man. Keep going.
I got to go back to that. So this is just a little thing, and I hope I can share this, Chad, but it was an amazing thing to me. Back to that Grand Valley project. They, about 6 or 7 years after that install was completed, they did a renovation of the scoreboard. And during that renovation, we had to take the loudspeakers down. I'll just be honest, we took them down, and the weatherizing of the box had not held up real well. So it was coming off. They looked pretty shabby. Now, when they're 60 feet in the air, you don't see it. But when we had to take them down for the renovation, we put them on the ground. They were looking a little rough. The wood was showing through it. They had been beaten up by the Michigan weather.
Yeah, those West Michigan winters are unforgiving.
Here's the crazy thing. I literally took a picture of these speakers. I sent it to Chad, and I said, Chad, what do I do with this? I was expecting him to say, or the people from Danley and Chad to say, you know what? We'll send you a can of our weatherizer or something here, spray this on here, do that. That's what I was expecting. I was just asking him. It wasn't an hour later. Maybe it was less. I got a text back from Chad. He said, you know what? We're going to send a truck to Michigan, from Danley to pick those up, bring them back to our shop. When do you need them back? I said, well, I really should have them back in about a week and a half. We got to put them back up. No problem. Like 2 days later, there's a truck, picks them. I wasn't even there. They went and got them themselves, put it on a truck, took them all the way back to Danley, reconditioned them. They looked like brand new. And a week and a half later, I had them sitting back on my job site, ready to go up. They looked like brand new.
Yeah,
now, here's the key thing. I never asked.
That's legit.
I never asked for that. And the other thing, Chad, what's the warranty? Normal warranty on a speaker?
Weatherized is a lot shorter. I think it's like 3 years.
Okay. We were 6 years.
Yeah.
No questions asked. I never got a bill. Grand Valley never got a bill.
That's amazing.
That to me speaks of who Danley is. I tell that story a lot. Hopefully you don't people calling you asking.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Favors and all that.
I'm not saying everybody else will get this. I'm just saying. But no, the real truth of it was,
Danley, call Todd.
Yeah.
I think, and Chad, you can jump in, but I think the real truth is that you recognize that was an early version of a Jericho, and you had changed your weatherizing methods. What you used on that speaker at that time, you had some problems with at other places, and you were just willing to take care of it because you knew it was something that probably wasn't right exactly to begin with, and it just happened. It was now the moral of that story is, in about a month, we're putting a brand new system into the basketball arena at Grand Valley.
There you go.
What do you think's going in there?
Danley.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, customer service.
That was requested by the college, because that's not just me remembering that. That's the end user.
The customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's huge, man.
They remember
I think we've all had those types of moments. We've all had those types of moments where customer service really can trump everything. Even if mistakes are made, if you have good customer service, it goes a long way long term. I have a quick little story about this.
And you could have sent me a bill for that too. I would have been fine. But just the fact that you were willing to do it was amazing to me.
Oh, would you look right here? I have a bill. Hold on.
Forgot to hold on to that for 6 years.
Make that out to Chad Edwardson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember one time, man, I ordered a brand new MacBook from Apple. This is like 10 years ago. And I think it was my first Apple computer that I personally owned. And I ended up putting it on the wrong card by accident. So I call up Apple. I'm like, oh my gosh, I put it on the wrong card. And you had to hear them. They were like, oh my gosh, sir, we are so sorry about that. Like, they did it, but it was my fault. Sir, because of this, we're going to go ahead and overnight it to you. We'll make sure we switch it to the other card. No problem. You'll have it tomorrow so that you can enjoy your new Apple product. And they didn't even do anything wrong. And, but I always remember that. And Grand Valley is always going to remember you guys going out of your way. And that speaks volumes about your company.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is it's probably the one thing that, I've been at this a long time, like Chad, longer than Chad, probably. Yeah. And it's
I can see it in your beard.
Yeah, I know. It's the one thing I would tell you that we've lost in our industry is that personal touch. Most companies today, because they've gone big and gone corporate and, mergers and everything else, you call up and it's like pulling teeth. To get somebody to take care of something that's even maybe their fault. Everyone's running the other way. And it's very refreshing to work with. It doesn't have to be free. I'm probably going to get you in a lot of trouble.
No. Well, it's not.
They're just willing to take care of it. They didn't tell me it was my fault. They didn't tell me. Right. It's just like, okay, what do we need to do to solve the problem?
Yeah.
And there's an old saying, I may not say it right, but it's like, it's not the fact that you're going to have problems, because they're going to come up all the time. And it's the same thing we carry at Parkway. We go into every project knowing there's going to be a problem. Nothing ever goes the way you planned, hardly ever, right? It's how you handle those problems that makes the difference.
Absolutely.
It's not the fact that you're going to have them. So,
yeah. And
anyway,
I mean, to continue on that story, I mean, obviously we have internally, we have a number of stories that we could that are similar to what you just described. It's not to point out that we have an abundance of failures. It's just that things happen. When you're selling a lot of stuff, certain things happen. And I will tell you, most of these are outside of warranty. So, I mean, you can have a cabinet. You've got to remember, it's a wooden cabinet that's been treated through a process of being fiberglassed and then being pretty much truck bed liner, or they call it polyurea, on the outside, and then it's got multiple UV coats, and they do as much stuff as they can. I mean, it's well thought out. It's just Mother Nature is the brutalest of the brutal. I mean, the sun, and when you have the expansion rate of the wood versus the expansion rate of the fiberglass itself, and then you got, So you've got things that are expanding, things that are rigid. So it's a very complex thing, and they're always trying to make that better. So like if back in 2010 or whatever that job was put in, there's no doubt that the weatherizing process was not as good as it was in 2005 or that it was in 2010 or sorry, not 2015 or even 2020. It's always getting better because things are always getting better, right? I mean, we're uncovering, Parkway may have had an issue, or another project somewhere else in the world may have had another issue, and we went, oh wow, we never thought about that. Or, I've had, where we've deleted handles or moved panels because, okay, we're not going to let that happen. That panel happened to rot out. But if that panel wasn't there, it would have lasted another 2 years. So there are those instances. It's not in our warranty to do what we did. So like you said, it's not a guarantee we're going to come. I'm going to come personally pick it up in a truck. But I appreciate you bringing that up because I'll be honest with you, I forgot about it until you started telling the story.
No, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah,
and neither has Grand Valley.
No, and that's awesome. I think that's great. I think that's really good.
That's
so what were we going to talk about? Where were we?
Yeah. So, why don't we jump into this? Why don't we jump into just talking about what separates Danley? Because it seems like you guys have found that your niche market is really this distance thing, really figuring out how to provide great audio from a long distance with these point source boxes. And that's what I've heard ever since I've come to Parkway. Because honestly, before coming to Parkway, I had never heard of Danley. Sure. And so Todd kind of put that on my radar, and I got to learn about the products and come to find out. I mean, yeah, you guys are in a lot of places, but it really seems like you guys have found a special niche where you're kind of, I don't know if you call it revolutionizing, but you're providing something that really works well in stadiums and arenas and outdoor. So tell us a little bit about that. What really kind of took you guys in that direction? Was it by chance, like, hey, this fits well in that context, or was there some thought like, no, anytime I go into this sort of a place, whether it's an arena, a large space, the audio always seems to die off at a certain point. And was that something that you guys were like, we want to tackle this and kind of figure it out?
Well, a lot of this came about, or it started, like the Jericho line is pretty much what brought this about. And that whole concept started about a year, maybe 2 years before I came on. So it would have been just before the Grand Valley project and the J1. It goes back to people absolutely love the sound of like an SH50 or any of the previous products. Okay. And they kept wondering, okay, like, we had people using SH50s in live sound, which is fine, but they were trying to do large venues. And it's just, if you look at the specs, you go, you can't do you're not going to do loud rock and roll in a large venue with a bunch of SH50s. It's the wrong box for it. So going back to the idea of that progression, finally what happened was somebody, I forget who it was. I think it was somebody at Live Sound magazine they said, hey, would it be possible to build a version of the Synergy horn that was big enough to play like a 10,000 seat concert, a single box, because instead of stacking up a bunch of boxes. And so Tom went to thinking on that, and he knew that the HF had to get louder. That was where we had to get more output. So we had to get summation in, which that birthed the whole idea of these HF combiners. And I think the fact that it works so well at a long distance is just, we already had the technology, which is the Synergy horn, which is 15, and actually there's versions of previous versions that Tom did in other companies. the Synergy horn has been progressing for a long time, way more than the 15 years of Danley. So when he finally said, well, heck, I think I could build a Synergy horn that gets louder, a lot louder. So the fact that it works so well at a distance is just merely the fact that it's a Synergy horn, honestly. And that's one thing that I love about doing designs, and I try to state this in anything that I'm if I'm training somebody or teaching somebody how to use direct. The great thing in the Danley line, some people argue we have sometimes too many products, and they're not put out there in such a way like the we've got the X series, and then there's an 8-inch, a 10-inch, a 12-inch, a 15-inch, and then there's the Z series, and there's an 8-inch, a 10, right? So there's nice categorized.
Not to name names.
Yeah.
Well, there's several names that could apply to that.
Right. So, and I get it. I mean, that's a very
8, 10, 12, 14, 15.
Yeah. It's a big consumer. Like
40,
it
60,
makes
40.
It makes sense. Yeah, right. Rotatable horns.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our line is there's a lot of tools for a lot of things, but what I love is if I take this example, if I've got a room, the first question to answer is, what coverage do I need? It has nothing to do with level, doesn't do with sound quality, nothing. What coverage do I need to cover this room? If I'm trying to shine light into this space, what kind of angles, what do I need to cover these people? Okay. So do I need in the lighting world, do I need like a Fresnel, or do I need an ellipsoidal or something? You know what I mean? Like, do I need narrow or wide coverage? Okay. Well, in our line, if I say, okay, I need a wide speaker, and I consider wide like pretty much 90 degrees and up. Well, I could use something as small as like a go-to. I could use a 100 SM100. I could use a 100B, and I'm going up in level is my point here. I could go to SM96. I could go to an SH69 that you guys just used. I could go to an SH96, 96HO. I could go to a J394. I could go to a J795. I could go to a J1. Like, these are all I can take you as far as you want to go in level, but the first question is coverage. I don't care if it's Danley or brand X, but we have to cover the space. So we give you a lot of options. And then you just pick, is it spoken word? Well, heck, I don't need a 96HO. But if it's a large contemporary space, maybe I do. Mm-hmm. So I think I know your main question was, well, so how did we get in the game of the long throw type stuff, or the long distance coverage? And it's real simple. I think it just comes back to we're using the same principles we use in our SH50 or our SM100, or we're trying to create a cohesive wavefront, full bandwidth in a single horn. And when you do that and you just elevate the level, that's the product. That's what's going to be.
That's
there.
Cool. Yeah.
A lot of your products were maybe not a lot, but I know a number of your products were actually developed out of the customization thing. So someone asked you to build a product specifically for an application.
Sure.
Isn't that how the Genesis horn came out? The JH60, JH40?
Yeah, the GH60.
GH.
So that one in a different form came from Turner Field, which is where the Braves used to play in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And these big baseball stadiums, college, minor league, whatever, they all kind of have that same idea, that distributed from the parapet wall of the upper deck. But what you suffer from is you typically have to put two speakers out there, a long throw and a short throw, and you've got to cover this monstrous vertical, or whatever you can call it, front to back. Mm-hmm. And so there was a custom box called the Birdhouse, and it was meant to cantilever off of the front of the parapet wall. And what it did was it had the amplitude shading. That's where that started. So it had this amplitude shading to allow most of the energy to go out the top of the horn down to the field, or to the end of, or the edge of the bleacher seating at the field. And then it had the minimal amount of energy coming out of the bottom right below it to cover the people below it. And that amplitude shading is really what birthed the GH60, because it uses that technology. And that's definitely a technology that I would love to see us progress on.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners are from the Grand Rapids area, next time you go down the highway 131 past Whitecap Stadium, just look on the roof as you drive by. If you went off the highway, you'd probably land on them. So they're right there on the roof, which I'm not suggesting you do that, but there's two of them, and they basically sit on top of the roof behind home plate, if you will, and they fire down each side of the seating area, and you've got 6 dB from the near point to the far point coverage all the way down the sides from a pair of loudspeakers. It's the same thing. It's that whole design philosophy you guys have of developing point source devices that cover multiple areas from a single point. Sounds like one loudspeaker again. So,
well, along that line's a neat story about the BC series, which is one of our subwoofer series.
I knew we'd get to woofers eventually. Yeah. Michael's been dying to get to this point.
Well, the BC series is fun because we had got a call from a civilian contractor that was working on a specification for the military, and they wanted it had to be this certain dimension, and it had to be this frequency range. It was to fly pretty much with a helicopter, and we believe, because they don't give you all the information, but deciphering what they had there, it looked like it was to pretty much have a stealth mode on the helicopter to silence the I guess it'd be the rotor wash or whatever. But that project, we came up with the BC 412 because it fit. That was the size that they had to have, and the output and the frequency response, and it worked really well. We were blown away with it. And
hold on,
wait a minute.
Yeah,
we gotta back
you're trying to noise cancel the helicopter, correct?
Well, again, we weren't privy to all of the information. It's kind of like the Matterhorn.
This is the government, right? We can't really tell you everything. We'll have to kill you.
They give you a performance spec, and that's about it. It needs to be this size, this loud, this frequency response, and that's about all the information they give you. But the great thing was they did not end up using it because when we achieved what they asked for, they just threw out, well, can you make it half the size and have it go twice as low? And it's like, well, if you understand anything about physics, no. So, so it kind of, I'm not sure whatever came about it, but they pretty much wrote the spec out there to no man's land, and you couldn't touch it. And of course it's on a helicopter too. It's got to be efficient, right? It can't just be, load it up with 100,000 watts of power and go to town. It's not going to fit on the
drag a very long cord behind the helicopter to power it.
Yeah, exactly.
A huge generator on the motor.
But the great thing is, for all the bass heads, the BC series has been extremely popular. The electronic dance market, the BC 412, 415, and 218 have just been great. That's
kind of your go-to for outdoor subwoofer stadiums as well, right?
Yeah, we used to use a lot of the TH812s, which are still a really good box. And they're actually the flatter of the boxes. They go a little bit lower, but the BC series just has that. We're not in a lot of these sporting venues. It's not so much about the 30 hertz as it is about the 50 hertz, right? 50, 60. They just want that boom, 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 boom. So again, efficiency. If I can give you, if a BC product can give you 6 to 9 dB more in that 50, 60 than let's say a TH812, that's where I'm going to go. because if I can give you 6 dB, that's a quarter of the boxes.
Right.
So that's where all that really makes a big difference.
And again, these are long throw subwoofers, correct?
Yeah. So especially, the big thing with the BC is it's the boundary coupled. So as you couple them up, you're creating more of a boundary. So instead of doing like cardioid base arrays to try to negate the energy out the back of the cabinet, we're physically doing it out the front like a horn would. So the great thing is, in a cardioid array, you're having to give up a little bit because you have to dedicate one of those subs to being the canceling, to cancel the back sub. And it doesn't give its full, 6 dB of output to the front, to the audience. Whereas if I can give you, 12 plus dB of rear rejection physically, that's just equating to all the energy going out the front. Mm-hmm. It's like, I always use the analogy, to light a candle in a room and then put a mirror on one side of it. Guess what? That other side of the room got really bright and the back of it got dark. I mean, that's the simplest way to imagine how it's working. So
we were down there in July, and I believe you guys set one of these up.
Yep.
With a J1 on a forklift?
Yeah, there's a 415 with the J1.
Yep, and you guys had us walk all the way across the street, which I think was close to a football field, 100 feet maybe.
And it's if we were there and you guys went across the street to the streets, did we set up right outside the door there?
Right outside the garage door.
So that's to the road.
It's high-tech stuff here.
Yeah.
160, 70 feet to the road.
Yeah.
Whatever you were beyond that. So you were pushing a couple hundred feet.
And you guys fired up Brother in Arms, Dire
Mm-hmm.
Straits, and I was just in heaven. And it sounded like a studio record from that distance.
And then this car came down the street, and it literally pushed the car off the road.
It did.
Yeah.
It flipped it. 3 times.
All right, that's really not true.
But it could be. Next
boy.
speaker.
So, okay, we can't talk about subs without it. And we're going to go long here. This may be one of these 2-session things, but
yeah.
If you got to tell at least the story about the Matterhorn. If no one, I know it's online. If you don't want to tell the story, go check it out. But it's basically a semi-trailer that's converted into a subwoofer.
Yeah,
right?
It's a 20-foot Conex container, and everything except the back 3 feet, I think it is a big bass horn. The back 3 feet is an amp rack with 40 1,000 watt amplifiers in it. So there's an amplifier per channel that can deliver 1,000 watts at 4 ohms. And then there are 40 15-inch long excursion. They're pretty much like car audio subs in the walls, and they are using our tapped horn bass technology, and it's just a beast. It was military driven.
Okay.
And they again didn't necessarily tell us what they wanted, but it was what was it? It was something crazy. It was like 100 and it was really low frequency. It's I think it's 15 to 20 or 15 to 30, which it really, if you listen to it, the sweet spots for me are like 22 and 11. They're harmonics, so or half octaves. Or octaves, I'm sorry.
We're talking hertz here, right?
Yeah. So 11 hertz. If you play 11 hertz on that thing, and we're having a conversation, it's like, when you're talking into a fan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it modulates the air between us, and it's all you hear that modulation at 11 hertz. But
it's almost
I heard it
the
once
brown
with
note.
just a couple of amplifiers tied into it, and it's not something you want to experience for very long.
Yeah. We just run like a 12 gauge extension cord across the parking lot and plug all 40,000 watts of amplifier into one
a little lower, and you're hitting the brown note.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that we want to touch base on with the low end and in subs? So that way we can tickle Michael's fancy a little bit with the whole low end conversation.
Well, you guys tell me. We covered the Matterhorn, which is obviously the big elephant in the room.
Well, I think, but prior to, if I understand the history of Danley, you guys really took off with subwoofers
Subs are a passion of Tom's, right? Low frequency. Yep. That's his passion really grew out of that, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. I mean, Tom had the servo drive. He had he came up with the servo drive cabinets back in the 80s. And, those, if you don't know what those are, those were, they're belt driven, motor driven, low frequency speakers. So they're actually a servo motor instead of a magnet and a coil. But there's a servo motor driving a belt system that actually drives the low frequency. And back in the day, that was the best way to get the parameters that Tom was looking for to load the servo drive horns. So he was always infatuated with horns. His story is when he started paying attention to full range cabinets was he was invited to a U2 concert. And I may get this wrong. I think he might have been there because they were using his subs, the servo drive subs. That might not be correct. But he's at the concert. He's at front of house, and this is like pre-show. And he asked the guy, or the guy was going through some line checks, and it was a big turbo sound rig, or so, it was something huge, right? It's U2, and he. I think this is one of those tours too, where they're doing the big mono system out there in the middle over the stage. Mm. And he started turning off sections of the PA, and it started sounding better. He was noticing the less you had on, the better it sounded. So that's where he really started being inspired about, okay, wait a second, what is going on in these systems? The interaction and all that stuff. And he started going, well, the only way to get away from this is the origin virtually or, acoustically, whatever, has to be back to some point. And that's what drove his whole.
It goes into all your designs.
Yeah.
I mean,
that impression, it stuck with him, and that's why we are what we are.
That's awesome.
So the big thing to me, just kind of thinking through this whole, like I said, I've been around a while. We used to, I've been doing outdoor football fields, high school football fields, things like that for many years. And until I met Danley, in the products that they produced, did I have a product line? I finally had a product line that I could give somebody sitting outdoors on a football stadium the same quality I could if they're sitting in an auditorium indoors. Mm-hmm. I mean, before it was a lot of fiberglass boxes and, displayed, distributed systems on light poles and, plastic boxes and all kinds of things. But Danley just gave me a tool to take that to a whole new experience outdoors. I think that's been the biggest thing for me, both in their full range boxes, their speakers. And the only way we could really, the only real way to experience that would be to give us a call here at Parkway, and we'll take you there. I mean, we can talk about boxes and speakers forever, but to experience it just really tells the story.
Todd will buy you lunch and everything.
Oh, yeah.
He'll wine you and dine you. No, but
it's impressive. It absolutely is.
I actually haven't yet, so I'm waiting for Todd to take me on a date out to one.
Our latest installation is like 2 minutes from our office over at Zeeland East High School.
Oh, let's go do it.
Which is just killer.
Is it?
One thing that's great is, and Christian, you may not know this, but I'm actually born and raised in Michigan. So.
Oh, really?
Yep. My brother graduated from Grand Valley State. I'm from Elk Rapids, by Traverse City.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I moved, left the state back in 98 or something like that. So been in Florida for a while, and then now I'm in Georgia. But
what part of Florida?
Pensacola.
Pensacola. Okay, yeah, I lived down in Florida for about 5 years, and don't plan on ever moving back. But loved my time there.
I had a short 13-month stint in Florida, and
Oh, it's so
It was
hot.
great, but I was glad to leave.
It's so hot. Oh my gosh. Well, Chad, thanks so much for joining us today. Any final thoughts before we let you go? Anything that you would like to share? Maybe where people can find Danley products. Are you guys on social media? Definitely share as much information there as possible, because we'd love for people to just be able to find any and all information you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're looking for Danley products and a demo, reach out to Todd and you guys there at Parkway. We've had a great relationship, and it spans several years.
Yeah.
We're talking 10 plus years ago, and you guys continue to support us, and we appreciate that. You can find Danley has a Facebook and Instagram. I don't think we have an active Twitter, but we do have, there are some, also a couple of Danley user groups that are not run by Danley employees, but you can find some end user conversations and such. So there's a lot of Danley fans. We're not the biggest name in the industry, but man, we are doing really well, and we keep gaining market share, and we love working with dealers all across the country. And and I appreciate you guys, taking the time to have us on today.
I appreciate you joining us, Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
absolutely. Thank you so much, man.